Om Tare Tu Tare Tu Re Soha. Om Tare Tu Tare Tu Re Soha. Om Tare Tu Tare Tu Re Soha. Om Tare Tu Tare.
All right, well, kind of excited. We're trying a new thing here. We're trying to let the people here at the Dharma Center be seen as well as see all of you. We are in this beautiful text, Approaching the Buddhist Path. We're working with afflictions. And the last few sessions have been around how we can use our wisdom, our conventional wisdom, our intelligence to cut through some of the misperceptions that give rise to afflictions, how afflictions arise, understand that process, and even dive into how do we purify the mind of the seeds that give rise to anger, resentment, fear, insecurities, things of that nature. And so I did invite people over the last couple of weeks to work on their biggest affliction, the biggest issue in their life that's preventing them from being real clear and present in the way that they'd like to be, and then offer the opportunity to engage in a purification practice. And I offered the transforming unskillful events meditation. So before we just dive in, I'm curious if we might check in and see if anyone had any questions or revelations or insights or thoughts that they'd like to share regarding their practice over the last couple of weeks. And remember, you are recorded, so it should be a really good insight. Oh, we're being silly here. So you can just unmute yourself. Okay, well, you guys are going to be like that. Well, let's bring up the text. Okay, so we were making a point last week. We wrapped up a bit on this. Was the idea that us just thinking about how we can change isn't going to really change us much. That having some thoughts, for example, here, anger is awful, may it disappear, having an aspiration to be more peaceful isn't that effective. Rather, we have to really dive deeply into the understanding of the causes of our afflictions and then actively cultivate that in our daily lives. So that's where last week we really gave an invitation to work with a specific affliction, to work with the practice of cultivating intelligent regret, resolve, some understanding of how they arise. And then there's this journey of analytical meditation. So within the Gaelic tradition, of which I'm a part of, so as my ordination, analytical meditation is just one of the most important processes that we can engage in. So it's different than a shamatha practice, different than concentration, but rather really honing in a meditation on a situation, an event, something that we want to understand more and really attack it, just attack it. Does this hold up? Does it make sense? Or understand something, is this anger really something that is caused from another person, or is it caused from my side? What's going on with that? Let me just pierce into that, take a look, understand it. And then, as we talked about with the three wisdoms, hearing a teaching, meditating on a teaching, then, analyzing a meditation, then meditate. Oh, I'm going too fast. Hearing a teaching, analyzing the teaching, really contemplate, and then meditating on the teaching. A huge part of this is observing it in my daily life. And I think that's where most of the transformation can take place, is that I can bring an awareness and try something different. For example, one of the ones I like to do is just see everyone as my dear friend, everyone I meet, old friend. Does that change my interactions with people? Does my experience change? Do I engage with people in a different way? Do they respond to me differently? Oh, I found generally that has worked quite well for me. I can start to work with whether I change my attitude, or can I have a greater perspective and sort of interdependence of a moment? Am I the same John that I was yesterday? Am I the same John of 10 years ago? What's new today? Am I becoming all the time? Am I actually constantly arising dependence upon the moments that I live in? Do I have issues, or do issues arise in my life from time to time? Or do I carry them around like a little sack? These are my issues I'm carrying with me. I've got this label, I'm sticking it on me. I'm this kind of person. I've got ADHD, I've got this, I've got that. Or are these aspects of my life that are, changeable? And what are the labels I carry about myself? Are they who I am? And so within a meditation, we can look deeply at that and recognize, am I an impatient person? Well, sometimes I'm patient. So, okay, maybe I'm a person who's sometimes impatient, sometimes patient. These labels that I'll apply to myself as though they're fixed, as though I am this way, except when I'm not that way, which is a lot of the time. And then there's an opportunity to, okay, let me now notice in the day where I get stuck, seeing myself in this way. Or let me be aware of when I'm not that way, whatever label it is I'm sticking on myself. And in this way, we bring a vipassana, an insight into my daily actions. And if I can consciously see that afflictive state arise and watch it go, experience that what I was so worked up about today came and went, and then, dinner time, I'm not thinking about it. Or that little event in the morning, I'm still thinking about it dinner time, like I can't let go. And, where is that coming from? What I attend to becomes my reality. So I can be really in desperate, sadness and depression over, something that is now missing in my life or not invited to. I was talking to someone now whose family's changed and they're not having their family gathering for Christmas. It's a deep sense of loss. And so, that's a loss. That's something that they value, and it's not available now. But what is available? Well, I have my life, my new wife, my family, friends coming from out of town, and a Christmas that I get to. In his case, it was a Christmas dinner he was thinking about, with what I get to create now. So I can spend 6 months on what I don't have, or become aware of what I do have. And all this is something that I can start to be engaged in. How much of my life that I'm focused on with a mental state that gets afflicted, caught onto, attached to something, is actually robbing me from, the abundance of my life today, the capacity to have joy. I was listening to a Dharma talk earlier today, and in it was about a good reflection of whether we have a practice is that we have joy in our life. And I just, we can get pretty caught up. This is a hard practice. I was talking to another person the other day, and there was no joy in their practice. They're beating themselves up around their practice. And, am I doing it right? And all that. And I'm not the person I should be. And so these are another afflictive states. And so we really want to see where this mental emotional suffering is coming from. Is it really the events, everything I'm attaching it to? Or is it really coming from how I'm attending to it? Now, you and I might get this example. I get that. And as being pointed out here, that won't change our lives. What will change our lives is challenging it in real time. What will change our lives is spending some real time bringing to mind in a real critical, thoughtful way and sitting with that deeply. So the purification practice I talked about, the 4 opponent powers, and the short version that I offered called Transforming Unskillful Events, are really times to engage in what we call analytical meditation, to really dive deeply and let some realization arise. And so that's the process of 3 wisdoms. Wisdom 1, hearing a teaching, talking about a teaching. Second one, analytical meditation, really thinking about it deeply, checking it out, challenging it, letting some real deeper realization arise, some understanding. And then the meditation piece comes actually after that, which is called the wisdom meditation, letting that realization sink in, sit with it, let it really become familiar with it. The Tibetan word for meditation, gom, means to become familiar with. So it's not limited to, just this practice of, formal sit, but to become familiar with, the mental afflictions, to become familiar with the mind, to become familiar with, to really sit with it. And so if I do that, the next piece is, okay, well, I need to do it in real life. Okay. And then note that. So one of the practices that we have is kind of check-ins, I stop a few times a day and check in and note, write it down, know about it. And then in the evening we do a review. And in this way, we start to notice the patterns of our mind, notice, where's the real source of my suffering? And where's the real source of my joy? And how can I access this freedom that's already here? The teachings are that our mental obscurations are like dust on a mirror, and if we clear the dust, we're brightly lit. We're already here. We're already have these qualities. And so it's nice if we can taste that from time to time, and within that to know that underneath, the afflicted nonsense of John is actually Buddha nature. It's like, wow. So is my practice cultivating more freedom and joy, or is it creating a tightening and or even just a mental superiority? A lot of people like that, we'll talk about Buddhism all day long and debate on this and that, but really miss the point around compassion, connection, and kindness. So what's being presented here then is really looking deeply at how do I water the seeds that give rise to some joy, some freedom, some liberation from these afflictions. And right here at this point, they're coming to compassion. Compassion broadens the scope of our mind. It makes it more accepting and inclusive of others. Destructive emotions, such as attachment and anger, usually focus on one person or one class of people, whereas compassion can be extended to all living beings. The object of our compassion doesn't need to be someone we have met, because we already know that everyone wants to be freed from suffering and seeks happiness. So here's our entry point to what's being called great compassion. Great compassion starts with seeing that all beings are like me. As a matter of fact, in the cultivation of bodhicitta, the steps starts with equanimity. That's point 0. And then we come to a point where we recognize that everyone is like me. Everyone is trying to find happiness. Everyone is trying to avoid suffering. Everyone is suffering from afflictive states. Everyone has the same sort of struggle of perceiving their joy and happiness outside of themselves and misdirecting causes of real joy and happiness, confusing that with the triggers and the conditions that give rise to it. And will spend their whole lives, rearranging the world so they could be happy on a temporary basis. And as Shanti Davis says, everyone wants happiness, and we're all running to to the causes of suffering because we're seeking short-term pleasure as though that can provide that which we seek. And then an attachment forms. And then it's gone. Then I'm at loss, or it's not the way I want it to be. And then that shiny, wonderful thing of happiness isn't as happy anymore, Third piece of apple pie is not as good as the first. My favorite song, 1,000 times later, not so fun. Even, we can take our partners for granted, our friends for granted. They can change, they're not bringing me the joy they're supposed to. And totally miss that we actually have a direct relationship in how we're experiencing others and the things in our lives, and how we get to experience them coming from our side. So everyone's suffering like this, as we know, right? And so with great compassion is seeing all around us. Look at all of the suffering. We don't need to know someone to know that they suffer in this way. And there's a vastness and openness. This is actually the teaching that transformed my life. I was pretty eager, Westerner, to learn about this Tibetan Buddhism stuff. It's been going to a little temple. And I went to a teaching from the monks that were traveling from Ganden Chartse Monastery. And that teacher gave this talk. He gave this talk that just said, you could have the thought in every activity that you do, may this be of benefit to all beings. That every activity that you engage in can be coming from a place of great compassion, including going to the bathroom. That caught my attention. May this bacteria feed the other bacteria that's supposed to be well and healthy, keep everybody well, and this nourishment that I'm receiving, may it nourish me so I can be a benefit to others. May I engage with, people with a care and a compassion that can be of benefit. May I cultivate these qualities so I can help others. Literally, whether you're walking, going to the bathroom, eating, talking to someone, that every single aspect of your life can be infused, that this way of living can be a benefit to all beings, and that ultimately, as I attain or realize, might be a better way, but realize these qualities within myself, I'll have a greater capacity to benefit others. And the thing is, he said it in a way that not only did it touch my heart, but I could see that he lived it. And so, what are you giggling at here? Huh? I got to know them a little bit. They stayed for a little bit at the monastery that I was at. And, this would be a turning point that would put me on a path to really engage with my teacher. But I just laughed because we did this one, and he held my hand, and I'm like, I'm a tough guy. And he's like holding my hand. And I'm like, well, this is good. Like, it's awkward, but it feels good, and I'm letting this man hold my hand, and you just feel the love through it, it's just so, and, walking around holding my hand, and I was like, okay. It'd be years later when I would actually ordain, and this geshe actually would become my teacher, my assigned teacher at the monastery. He's currently the abbot of Ganden Chödron Monastery. And, just very fortunate that, you're in a place where someone touches your heart in that way. And so I share that because I don't want to be hollow words, the idea that we can have compassion for all beings, that I believe I've met people who've done that. And I believe that I have a greater capacity today than I used to. And that's the way we begin. We just have a greater capacity than we used to. And after a while, we start to recognize that when people are acting in malicious ways, that they're suffering. And then compassion arises instead of anger. And with compassion, you can act skillfully. You can hold people accountable. You can set boundaries. You can do lots of things because it's about cutting through suffering. It's not about enabling unhealthy behavior. Compassion actions are actions that reduce suffering, period. So having that great compassion, it starts here with the expansiveness of it. That I am no longer me and them. I recognize we're all in a conditioned existence. We all have some misperception. We're all in this boat of this ocean of samsara. And then, wow, there's a spaciousness that really comes to mind. So in the practice of equanimity within the Tibetan tradition, they start with learning to see that all beings are suffering like you, and all beings are seeking happiness like you, and to be able to extend your love that you would have for your grandchild or your children to the people that you don't know, and then to bring to mind the people that you don't like, and to actually bring them into your practices until at some point all others, have the same, we can have the same degree of care and compassion as we would for our grandchild. And, that sounds like a big task. Unless you start working with it a little bit and you start recognizing, well, in my case, I once said this when my daughter was in her Dharma teaching. And I said, is there any reason I should love you any less than I love my daughter? I can't find a reason. Everybody, somebody's daughter, brother, son, child, right? Everybody. My daughter, somebody else's daughter, son, etc. Why would I love someone else any less than her? She's sitting in the back thinking, well, I can give you a couple reasons. But no, she really gets it. And why don't I challenge that thought a little bit? So that would be an analytical thing. Why would I not care? And by care is to see their value, to have care and concern about each and every being I come in contact with, because just like me, they are seeking to find a way to be okay. So we do have a meditation called Just Like Me, and it goes through that process. And in fact, it is an analytical meditation, just like me. All others are seeking happiness just like me. All others are trying to avoid suffering just like me. All others have known hardship and despair and struggle just like me. All others are trying to get their needs met just like me. All others are trying to find their way, right? They're learning how to live. Well, it's one thing to say the words, but if we do it in a meditation on a frequent basis and we start bringing to mind some of the people that we struggle with, we can start to recognize that they're seeking happiness sometimes in the same way I am, and not so healthy ways that I have done. Oh, a little bit like me. And then I start to see that, they also have these good qualities, that are a lot like me. And I recognize that I do some of these very things that I am challenged by with others and have done. And so meditation like that, just like me, meditation is one that would apply to what we're talking about here, where we don't just say, well, compassion can be spread to everyone. Well, okay, how's that work? And is that possible? And is that realistic? Well, here's the method, and here's the rationale for it. And then you will also find within this tradition the benefits of cultivating great compassion for all beings. And you'll also find within the Lama the disadvantages of not. Right? I'm going to suffer a lot more if I don't do this, and I'm going to be in a lot better shape if I do this. And you're going to find a whole list of reasons. And I think just right off the top, without going through a long list, if you could see the value in all other beings, do you think you would suffer less? And what would it be like to not get offended? That's an affliction, to be offended. I'm offended because somebody else is struggling with their own misperceptions. And now I'm offended because they're trapped in a lot of pain and misperception and limitation. So what if, if I understood that, maybe I wouldn't be offended so much. And I would be more skillful in how I interacted maybe with people that are sharing things that are maybe pretty harmful. So the idea here, and we're just on one paragraph, and that's the, I think, most important point of engaging with Dharma, is not that I read a big book and I can talk about it. I can take a paragraph and the layers of that, let it unfold. So back to this paragraph. Simply put, they're making a point that compassion can be extended to all living beings. The object of our compassion doesn't need to be someone we have met, because we already know everyone wants to be free from suffering, seeks happiness. Well, it's one thing to say that. It's another thing to know that. I mean, deeply. And so this becomes a practice. Have I met anyone who doesn't want to be free from suffering and doesn't want to be okay? So the invitation this week is to start to recognize and see some commonalities. And I think what I will do is post the meditation just like me. There'll be an invitation this week to engage in this practice of just like me. Now we'll move on just a bit to, again, they're talking about the benefits of compassion. When our mind is unhappy, compassion and love uplift us. The best offering to make to all the Buddhas is to abandon harming others physically, verbally, or mentally. Compassion is about removing suffering. Those three things just listed are about suffering, right? So you want to see that contrast. The best offering we can make is to abandon harming others physically, verbally, or mentally. Unlike afflictive emotions, virtuous mental states do not have self-grasping ignorance as a support. So cultivating the wisdom that overcomes ignorance won't harm our virtuous emotions. If anything, it will eliminate obstacles to generating them. If we really care about ourselves, we'll generate an altruistic intention because it gives us encouragement, enthusiasm, resilience, and a good heart. So a wisely selfish person is altruistic. That's clearly one of the Dalai Lama's lines. He always says, well, if you're going to be selfish, be wisely selfish, care about others, because you're going to benefit. So there's a process that you're going to find throughout all of these teachings. And again, just the bigger context to this text, this first volume, is that of preparing to engage in Lam Rim teaching, stages of the path. And within the stages of the path are going to be a series of these meditations that we go through. There'll always be a process that says, what's the benefit of this? What's the disadvantage of not doing it? What's the benefit? What's the disadvantage of not doing it? And in that way, we'll go through this sort of process. So they're always going to bring it up. Because the point is, we don't do something just to do something. And if anyone's teaching Buddhism and they say, well, because the Buddha said, not a valid response. Not a valid. The Buddha even said, don't take anything I say on face value. Test it yourself. How do you know, when he was asked, how do we know your teachings are the right ones? He says, you don't. Your job is to test them if they're right or not. That's your job. And so we start with, does it make sense? What would be the benefit? What would be the downside? And we engage in that way. So they're presenting this in that way here. Habituating ourselves to constructive perspectives is one of the purposes of kathas, or short phrases used in mind training practice. For example, while cleaning the dishes or washing the car, we can think, I'm cleansing away my defilements and those of other sentient beings. There's an old story about a monk who was not very bright. He's not very bright. And the other monks, didn't treat him very well. And they tried to work with him, but they would say, like, he can't memorize anything. We try to teach him something, he forgets. And you teach him one thing, a few minutes later, he can't remember it. And trying to remember the story exactly, whether it was the Buddha, maybe it was the Buddha that said, let me give him a job. And what they could do is have him sweep the courtyard, the leaves. And by the time that would get done, he'd be on the other side, and then leaves would come and he'd go back. And so he would sweep the leaves. And he was given one of these gathas, which is, I'm sweeping away the leaves, I'm sweeping away the obscurations. Just a very simple sweeping away. And he would do this practice. And then the story goes that, he actually wound up literally understanding, sweeping away the obscurations that prevent him from recognizing his Buddha nature and achieve awakening in this process. And I think he gave a great teaching. Like, they're all making fun of him, and he comes in and gives this nice teaching. So that's a short version of that story. Hopefully I got the gist of it dead on. So we can be doing this with doing the dishes. We can, bring it to mind. The idea is to bring it to mind, because what happens is we forget. Have a good teaching, have good intentions, have a good motivation, get into our day, totally forget, get caught up in John, me, you, it, and they're annoying and all that happens. So the more that you can use these short phrases, you can remind ourselves of reality ultimately. So these are little habits that we can cultivate. And I gave another one. When going upstairs, I will lead all sentient beings to awakening. So when upstairs, I'll lead all sentient beings. And when going downstairs, I'm willing to go to suffering abodes to benefit all sentient beings. In this way, neutral everyday actions are transformed into a path of awakening. So when I go upstairs to the little room that I do my morning practice, and I often will think I'm going to the monastery. I'm going to the sacred place for Buddhas. I'm going up these stairs. A lot of times I also think these are the stairs that my wife built and put in here. I get to walk on these stairs that were put here, and enter this beautiful place with all the Buddhas, and bring that to mind. And it's a lot better than just staggering up the stairs waiting for the coffee to be done. Some afflictions are destructive emotions that are counteracted by generating opposing emotions. For example, actually, I'm going to pause there because that's getting into another thought process. I think it'd be a good one to dive into next week. Do you want to pause there and check in with people and see any thoughts or comments that have arisen from our time together? I see some more people join us. Yes.
One thought that I have when you're talking about, I will do this thing for all sentient beings, it feels so grandiose to me, like it would be this huge thing, and it's kind of like feels uncomfortable.
Mm-hmm.
I can get the gist of it, but it's like, who am I to do this thing for all sentient beings?
Yeah, so just for in line, sorry, if online you didn't hear it, one of the challenges can be that, having the thought, I'm doing this for all sentient beings, pretty big task, who am I, have that kind of capacity. And so an approach that I have is that small things I do impact countless others, right? Small things I do impact countless others. People that I have never met are benefiting from me stopping at a stop sign. What I purchase, right? A comment that you made to help someone and how that went on in their life. And if I start to recognize how the life that I have today is because of countless others, we're in this building. I don't know all the people who built the building and the flooring and the roads I drive on and all that, is that when we start to recognize how interconnected we are, that as soon as I bring a little more care, loving kindness in the world, there's a little more love and care in the world, right? And so it's not that there's an immediate, I'm this all-powerful, gonna save the world. But there becomes a recognition that what I do makes a difference to countless others. And as we know in this globalized world, something that happens far away and a little thing has a huge ripple effect. So understanding that whether I gave someone some attention or didn't today may have saved someone else's life later, and then their children and so forth. And how many, lives get healed out of recovery. I know people work in treatment. How much better the world is because somebody did not pick up a needle or a beer today. Those are countless people. So understanding that our little actions actually have big ripples, and but the primary way that this is brought is that I will be able to help many more people if I cultivate these qualities within me. In other words, if I become a Buddha. So at one level, which is, which might seem grandiose, is that if I recognize my Buddha nature, become awakened, I'll be able to help people on multiple levels. So that's, this gist that, and in order to do that, I'm cultivating some qualities of kindness, some qualities, cutting through my affliction so I can be of great benefit. That's why, for example, Jetsuma sitting in a cave for 12 years. A lot of people, that's pretty selfish. What do you mean that's selfish? I mean, that's pretty hard work, And she's doing it to develop a mind that will be of much greater benefit to all of humanity and animals and so forth. And so that's the idea. That as I cultivate these qualities, I'm going to be able to help all sentient beings. Now, we may not be there, right? And if things seem grandiose, then I always start where I'm at, and that is, a real recognition that how I treat people has ripples, and it might save them from abusing, their partner. All kinds of things can happen. Simple story here. A friend of ours who did our year-long mindfulness training was a massage therapist, and this woman came in, for massage, made the appointment, and he just has a good heart, he's a big guy with a really good heart, attended to her, with real love, real care, and just really attended to her. And some days later, she called him back and thanked him so much for the care that he gave her. And he's, well, that's what I do. I'm a massager. That's my job. So she said, no, you don't understand. I made that massage appointment because that's one of the last things I was going to do before I killed myself. And the love and the care that you gave me just, changed my outlook, and I'm alive today because of that. So many times things like that happen in life, and we have no idea of the impact. And I remember a guy at a recovery meeting. They give numbers, as we know. If you're ever struggling, call a number. And newcomers, they encourage people to call numbers. It's pretty awkward to pick up a phone. They call it like the 500-pound phone, call somebody you don't know. And this guy called someone on there, just to do it. And the person he called, who's supposed to be sort of the supportive person in recovery, was in a bad place and thinking about suicide. And it was the newcomer calling the person who had some time, who was actually helping the other person. And so, I have a million stories like that. Not a million. That's an exaggeration. I have many stories like that. A little hyperbole there, a little exaggeration. I have many, many, many stories of that, of people I know personally and some of my own experience. So understanding that what we do does make a difference, but bringing some more awareness to it. And the idea is to kind of cut through some of those barriers, some self-limiting barriers, that a lot of times we, think, well, that seems impossible. Maybe. A lot of things have seemed impossible in life. Matter of fact, very few people thought that you would ever be able to do things like this with a phone. Like there's some little chip in there that allows this thing to be, 30 years ago, this is impossible, right? There's so much in our life that seems impossible until it's possible. So the idea is to cut through our own self-limitations, but do it in a way that makes sense, not Pollyanna, airy fairy. Like, no, it's got to see. Like, it helps if you see people who've done it. That's helpful, and then test it ourselves and work with it. So maybe I can't extend to so and so yet, but I can extend to this guy, and work my way up. All right. Anyone else online? Any thoughts there?
I have a thought.
Okay. I had one of those once. I went to jail though. So.
Well, I want to say it's really fun to see the Pacific Northwest contingent all sitting together up there. Yeah, this teaching has just really moved me tonight, and it makes me feel a lot of things on a spectrum, from so inspiring to, oh my God, I mean, how do I remember all these things all the time? And it brings home the value of Sangha and coming together weekly and hearing things over and over. And of course, it brings home the value of, really deepening the morning practice, adding to the layers of meditation, doing something like Just Like Me daily for a few weeks or a few months or whatever it takes, instead of just occasionally, to really pattern stuff in. And it also makes me want to get a tattoo. And I had that thought partway in, and then I kept changing what the tattoo would be. And the first thing I thought was, I want a tattoo somewhere that I can see it all the time. Everybody suffers. I mean, I just forget that, and I forget that everybody is suffering, whether we see it or not. And I just really want to remember that. So I don't know if I'll get that tattoo, or if I'll just get one that says remember, or Just Like Me, or something, but I'm going to think about it. So that's all. Thank you. I don't really have a question, just a few thoughts.
Well, thank you. Aaron he would write on his hand, right? Mm-hmm. His little thing that he wanted to remember all day. He'd literally write it on his hand, and he'd look down at it throughout the day. And, there's a guy whose heart, it's pretty amazing. Yeah.
Well, that might be easier than a tattoo. Maybe I'll try that for a while.
Yeah, it's a good starter kit.
Right? Okay, thank you.
Okay.
Hey, John, as long as we were talking about the four immeasurables, some of the four immeasurables tonight, it came to me when I was practicing this morning that the phrase for joy when we do the meditation on the four immeasurables is, probably can't remember to recite it now, but may all beings never be parted from upper rebirth and liberation's excellent bliss. And that the joy part of the immeasurables is often seen as sympathetic joy. And while I can, kind of see that the phrase we use certainly contains sympathetic joy in it, is there more to that phrase than the wish for sympathetic joy for others?
Yeah, thank you for bringing that up. And, it's an interesting phrase. I think I can actually put it up there for people, so we know what we are all seeing, exactly what you're talking about. I have. Okay, so I will share that on the screen here. So now, this is a Tibetan version of the four immeasurables. So I generally will not use the word sympathetic joy. I will use empathetic joy. And I think there's a different connotation. And empathy means, obviously I can relate to and your feelings. I empathize with you. Empathetic joy, that your joy is my joy, that we're really connected. And so generally that's the terminology I would use with that immeasurable. And in this one here at the end, it's the fourth one here. How wonderful it would be if all sentient beings were never parted from upper rebirth and liberation's excellent bliss. May they never be parted. I shall cause them never be parted. So in this sense, normally when we're talking about empathetic joy, we're talking about rejoicing in the virtuous actions of others. Right? So when they're doing something virtuous, we have a joy, like the same kind of joy we'd have if our grandchild did something good, that kind of joy, that we are rejoicing in their virtue. And that their virtue is our virtue, that we're all in this samsara conditioned existence, and they are providing virtue for all of us. And so we have that sense. And so here, though, it's phrased around the idea of never being parted from upper rebirth and liberation's excellent bliss. So that doesn't sound like virtue, except when you understand that the causes for upper rebirth and liberation's excellent bliss is virtuous activity. So in this sense, how wonderful it'd be if all beings, engaged in virtuous activities, right? That gave rise to upper rebirth. A human birth is an upper rebirth, and the way that you get that is through virtuous actions. Liberation's excellent bliss. And so, and there's a formula here. First off, how wonderful it would be. That's the first thing I envision that. Then that aspiration, may they never be parted, so may they stay in this virtuous path. And I shall cause them. And that becomes, well, in that case, I'm making a commitment to engage in this virtuous path, that I am going to engage in this, that they're inspiring me as well. And then we ask for help, right? Enlightened ones, please inspire me to be able to do so. So empathetic joy is the antidote to jealousy and envy. People do good things and all that, we might get jealous. And here we recognize that anyone, any being engaged in virtue is improving the quality of life for all of us, and we have a joy for that. And in that verse, within the Tibetan form, they link it to the results, which is upper rebirth and liberation's excellent bliss. But that's all based on virtue. So I'm not sure if that answered your question, but it gave a little teaching on that verse.
Yeah, that makes a lot more sense, because oftentimes to me it seems like when we learn about empathetic joy or sympathetic joy, that it's more that we're happy for somebody for getting having more kind of on a more worldly level, successes, having successes on a more worldly level. And that's kind of the understanding I've had of it. But this definitely gives it a much richer understanding.
Yeah, and it's not getting happy because somebody got a new car. We could rejoice in the fact that they earned and were able to buy a new car. That would be awesome. But it's around the virtue. It's always around the virtue. Somebody can get a new car and have not done much ethical to get one. And so forth. Yeah. So always around virtue. But thank you, Carla. I really always appreciate your thoughtful inquiries. Okay, I got about a minute here. Just want to see anyone else have a thought. Okay, so go ahead, please.
Sorry, John. I just wanted to get a little bit of clarification, because a light bulb just went off in my head. and I'll try to explain it. So basically, I don't have a problem with, or I can easily recognize that everybody is suffering and they have their own ideas of what they think will make them happy. But it's actually the step of valuing what another person's opinion is. And I hope this doesn't like show how self-centered I am. And hopefully everybody else is like me too.
Yeah.
But that step of basically realizing what I think is the right answer isn't as important. Like I have to value other people more so almost to a point to actually like practice that compassion.
Mhm. So there's a lot of teachings on, that other person's point of view being very important, but it isn't that their value or their perspective is going to be valuable for you at all. I often have found that by really engaging with someone, in an empathetic way, asking questions about their belief system or what's going on with them, has reinforced my belief, which is, a totally different view, because I've seen the struggle that they have. What we value isn't their values, but what we value is that their life is meaningful. We value that they are just as important as I am. And therein lies the whole issue. Like that's it in a nutshell. The thing to be eliminated is that little dark spot within, there's a visual of a little dark dot right in the center of our heart. Egoic mind that basically says, I'm a little more important. I'm a little more important. And that separates. And so the practice of Tonglen, there's this beautiful visual where you take in the suffering of others, and as it hits your heart, it just cuts through and explodes that dark spot in this radiant light of understanding our interconnectedness, our dependently arising experience, and all shines out, and we have that to offer. And so what becomes important is to be able to recognize the value in all others, even though their behaviors and attitudes and everything could be just horrifically detrimental to all of humanity. Understanding that underneath all that affliction is another being just like you who's trying to be okay. And we value that. We don't value their values. We don't value their behavior. We don't value any of that. We value that which is underneath all that, which is a being that, from birth has been trying to find some way to be okay. And based on their experience, their conditioning, their traumas, their joys, whether they've been loved or kicked or whatever, the culture they were raised in has created some behaviors or belief systems and potentially real, malevolent behaviors. We don't value that. What we value is underneath all that is a being that wants to be okay. Does that make sense?
Yes, thank you for that.
Yeah. And what helps me a lot is, when I see the really harmful people, people think that's not the right way to phrase it. When I see people are acting in really harmful ways, that would be the accurate way to say that, is just imagine their suffering. Like when have they known joy and peace? When have they known connection and just wow, how much missing in this compassion? arises. And you know, understand that at some level, and see if we can find, you know, some compassion there. And then compassion arises to see, how do I engage with this person? And sometimes that's, you know, some severe accountability, but not coming from a place that I want them to hurt, but from a place that I want them to stop engaging in activities that are going to harm themselves and others. And so, so a lot of times compassion can be really clear boundaries, really accountable activities, but they're not coming from a place of ill will. They're coming from a place of seeing the damage that's being done and not wanting them to have the pain of that. And so I think a lot of people can relate to that. And but what will be in all the teachings will be to, and it's even said in, you know, the 8 verse of thought transformation, to see all others as above yourself, right? And that doesn't mean we don't have self-esteem. It's just the opposite. If I have self-worth, I'm not really worried about all that. It means I can set myself aside for a minute and see this person as, you know, valuable and important, and that all others, there's many more others than me, they're valuable. And so Jetsuma Tenzin Palmo is so good at saying this, is that you really need a healthy sense of self to be able to eliminate the self. You don't sit there and go, okay, I'm uncomfortable, insecure, and I'm going to recognize no self. No. I need to learn to be okay with me. I need to learn how to be okay making mistakes. I need to, you know, learn what it's like to struggle. I need to fall down. I need to get muddy. I need to recognize my obscurations. I need to recognize my humanity, which allows me to recognize your humanity. And as I recognize that underneath all this, you know, nonsense of my self-grasping is, you know, goodness. I'm not broken. I'm all right. And then we engage in these processes of being able to see others in these ways, and we become more capable of, you know, I don't need to defend myself, my afflictions, right? I mean, my ego is a whole bunch of afflicted states. And so I don't need to defend my insecurities, my fears, and all that. They're not that important. What's important is how to engage in this experience. But that requires a lot of good work in self-care, a lot of self-compassion, a lot of nurturing of my sense of self. And as I do that more, then I'm going to be much more capable of seeing the value in others. So really important that we care for ourselves so that we can care for others. Having said all that, let us dedicate the merit and wisdom that we have cultivated this evening. We have created ripples beyond our measurement, and we can dedicate this for the benefit of all. By this merit, may I soon attain the enlightened state of Guru Buddha, that I may be able to liberate all sentient beings from their sufferings. May the precious Bodhi mind not yet born arise and grow. May that born have no decline, but increase forevermore. All right, well, thank you all so much. Such a joy to have you all here. I'm glad the group in Washington all got together and joined in there. Yeah, please be well. Take good care of yourselves. Take good care of those around you. I hope the holidays treat you all well and that you stay warm and safe.
Thank you, John.
Thank you, John. Thank you, everyone.
Thanks, everyone. Thanks, John.
Thank you, everyone. Bye.
Thanks, John.
Thank you, John. Nice to see you all.
Happy
Have a
solstice.
wonderful holiday.
Thanks, John.
Good night, John boy.
Hi, Daddy.
Good night, everybody.
Om Tare Tu Tare Tu Re So Ha. Om Tare Tu Tare Tu Re So Ha.